Okay, in this final session in this unit, we're going to have a look at some of the branches that come from ungodly control, and so we're looking at the practical side and the outworking of this kind of control. So number one, manipulation, and as we've already said, this could be in the form of children threatening tantrums, or men being physically threatening or even violent, wives withholding sex, or people saying that God said. Okay. Number two is domination, and we've just said violence of some kind of abuse is a typical outworking of someone misusing their authority or power to control another. Number three is standards, and this is imposing an attitude of, you must be how I want you to be and think you should be. You need to do what I want, how I want, or I cannot receive you. You must fit into my plans. So standards can be controlling. Number four, bitterness and unforgiveness. And this attitude is, I will not release you or forgive you for being how you are or who you are and not being and doing what I want. So this projects rejection, because if what you want or do is not enough, then by implication you are unacceptable. Now that's not fair, and so you can expect rebellion as a response to this controlling behaviour. Number five, being self-willed, leading to intimidation. So basically, if I don't get what I want, and if I don't get my way, you will pay in some way, or I will explode in anger. So look out. So there'll be intimidation involved. Number six, things have to be a certain way. Now this could come in the form of perfectionism, or what's known as obsessive compulsive behaviour, which is an extreme form of insecurity and fear, compelling you to control all the details or sometimes specific details of your life, and things have to be a certain way, or there is a fear in the person that something bad will happen. So it can be learnt behaviour growing up in a household full of fears, or it can come from a controlling environment where there would be some kind of payout if things were not done according to the will of, for example, a parent who also has a control issue. Others have grown up not believing that they're cared about and that they won't be looked after. So they control those around them to make sure everything is done the right way to meet their needs. Now, the demonic realm certainly can be working in areas of control. So there is a spirit of control that can also be there sometimes. But in order to identify heart beliefs relating to insecurity or fear, the best question that you can ask is, what will happen if? So, for example, what will happen if you don't check the door is locked over and over, or you don't do things this way or that way? Now, it can be a tormenting bondage for many insecure people that they have to keep checking things or doing things a particular way. So if you don't do things how they think things should be done, there can be some kind of violent or angry or extreme reaction at times. Sometimes these people will not trust others to do things for them because they believe that these things must be done a certain way. Okay, number seven, lack of self-control, and we've already mentioned this. It's as if their capacity for self-control is directed outwardly in getting others to do things for them, and as a consequence they have little or no self-control or authority over themselves. Number eight, the tendency to get others to do things for them. Controllers will always be getting others to do things for them. Remember, they're insecure, so they're making sure that you care about them because underneath they often believe that nobody does. For us as leaders, often people are more than willing to help us, and it's a good thing if we don't abuse that by getting them to do things for us that we could easily do for ourselves. Number nine, see blame, fault-finding and criticism. So they should have done it this way or that way, my way. That's criticism. They're not good enough. Usually you make these criticisms because you believe in your heart that in fact that you're not good enough. You feel that if you bring them down, that you will feel closer to being enough yourself. So it comes out of the deceitfulness of the heart. All right, let's look at effects of ungodly control on relationships. And we've already discussed the role reversal that's out of God's order for the home that comes as a result of insecurity. But we see many couples, Christian couples even, in conflict, wrestling backwards and forwards with each other, trying to impose their will on each other. And this creates instability and an insecure environment in the household, which will generationally generate more insecurity in the children down the family line. Healthy relationships can only exist in the context of free will and choice. Very important to know that. They will only exist in the context of free will and choice. And this is where you lay down your right to expect or demand anything from the other. Once you begin to live this way and treat each other this way, you'll soon find yourselves volunteering and preferring what the other partner wants. And in my opinion, the best place for sanctification of your will is in the marriage union. I always think that if you won't lay down your wants and your will for your partner, then you probably won't for God either. And this is an important part of the dying to self process, where life is no longer all about you. Now it's more about what we can give and offer. And when we release people into their own choices about methods and results and how they want to do things, we're giving them respect and valuing them. Otherwise, we're lifted up in pride, thinking that the only way is our way and we're always right. Galatians 5:13 says, "You, my brothers, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature." So we were meant to have free will and choice. Rather, serve one another in love. So the entire law is summed up in a single command: love your neighbour as yourself. So we need to make sure that we're not taking away the God-given freedom of others by trying to control them and impose our will upon them. That passage goes on in verse 15. "If you keep on biting and devouring each other, watch out, or you'll be destroyed by each other." So control destroys value, significance, and worth, because you're conforming them to what you want. While my wife and I were engaged just before we got married, we sold one of our cars to a delightful old lady who took us outside her home, and she gave us some excellent advice for when we got married. She pointed up to the roof of her house and she made these comments. She said, "You know, if I threw a rope over my roof and you were one each side of the house trying to pull it off, you would have a big struggle pulling against each other and you wouldn't make much progress." She said, "But if you both came around the same side of the house and worked together, it's as easy as anything." And so rather than oppose each other, contesting for our own will and way, if we lay down our side of the house and give our will to the other without expecting anything in return, then I can tell you from experience and more than 40 years of marriage that life goes from being your worst nightmare to your greatest joy. The scripture says, "Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use," in giving that is, "it will be measured back to you." So give and it will be given to you. It's the law of sowing and reaping. All right, let's look at the practical outworkings of ungodly control. Number one, it pushes away the ones that you're trying to control. If you're trying to conform somebody else to you, then you're not accepting them for who they are, which is an individual that may have different tastes and different things they like. Well, in fact, they almost certainly will. Number two, it reads as an unfair projection. It proposes that they're not good enough as they are and they should be something else. So it suggests that what they want is worthless, implying that they are nothing. All right, number three, love must come by choice. So if you make people do things to show that they care about you, it's meaningless, because even though they do your will, in this regard, you know that you made it happen. So it means nothing. It was not something that they did for you just because they wanted to. In this sense, there's a saying that's used in the musical world that could be applied here, and that's less is more, meaning that sometimes the right thing at the right time is more important than the volume or the amount of things that's done. It's more meaningful if people do less for you of their own accord and choice, rather than doing a lot for you that you have compelled them to do. All right, number 4, controlling God. Some movements even try to control God. There are extremes of faith where it's taught that if you believe hard enough and long enough that you can get God to do and give you whatever you want. Essentially, this can be like witchcraft, where you turn God into some kind of stock exchange or vending machine that who does your will and becomes your Holy Spirit, and you become God because he's now submitted to you. So faith principles are for us to receive the promises of God, which he already initiated and already stated in his word. So those are the things that he's promised to give us. God will not be controlled. You may have to save up for that red sports car or whatever it is yourself. He won't be controlled. He may well help you if you go about it the right way. 1 John 5:14 says, this is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything's a good promise, but to clarify that, according to his will, he hears us. And we know that he hears us, and if we know that he hears us, whatever we ask is a good promise. We know that we have what we have asked of him. Okay? So other people who may have been given everything that they wanted growing up sometimes get angry with God when he doesn't do the same as what they experienced growing up. You may see resentment and so on towards him. Now, this is usually rooted in resentment and anger that projects from parents who didn't seem to care about them, and now they believe that God doesn't care about them either if he doesn't supply their wants. Okay, God's promised to supply our needs, not necessarily all of our wants, because sometimes our wants aren't the best thing for us. So he's a good father. Number 5, legalistic religions. There are religions and denominations that demand that you conform to their religious standards for acceptance and so forth. So they can be very controlling in regards to who you marry, your finances, your spiritual disciplines, and so on. All right, let's go through probable sources of ungodly control. And as we've said, the number 1 is insecurity. We've already detailed that as we've gone through this study. The most common reason producing ungodly control are areas in which we don't feel secure. Number 2, modeling. At times, as a source, growing up, we see perhaps a controlling mother or father, and it can cause us to think, well, that's how you should behave and act towards others, and so then we replicate or copy that behaviour. As we've previously stated, it's often attached to cultural expectations, and so we see that controlling attitudes can be learnt by what we call osmosis, or soaking up the environment around us. Number 3, generational issues can be a source. There can be a spiritual element where a weakness or tendency to gravitate towards operating in this manner is present. All right, now what are we looking for in ministry? So whilst aware of other possibilities, we're primarily looking for historical insecurity events matching the current need to control your surroundings. Now, having noted the fruit of control, you will probably have a much better response if you ask the person if they ever feel a little bit insecure, as opposed to telling them they're controlling. Okay, you'll have some sort of reaction. All right, let me suggest some of what we would call associated inner beliefs or heart beliefs that flow from the heart that are connected to control. And so we see things proceeding from number 1, a lack of attention. And the inner belief could be, nobody cares about me. Well, if nobody cares about you, then you're going to take control and make sure you're cared about. It could be proceeding from number 2, which is a lack of protection. If you don't feel like people are protecting you, then you believe you must look after yourself, which means you need to make sure everybody around you is doing what they need to do. Number 3 is abuse. When you've been abused, you now believe inside. I can't trust others to look after my needs because when I do, I get hurt. Okay, number 4, lack of provision. Now, if you haven't been provided for, you may have an inner belief, I must get things for myself. Nobody really loves me or cares about what I need, so I must get people to provide for me. I must meet my own needs. Now, remember, these aren't necessarily conscious thoughts. In fact, we're looking at the fruit of these inner thoughts, which is controlling behavior. But the person isn't even aware that they're necessarily thinking these things, but because of past events, they have these beliefs, and now they have the universally predictable behavior that comes from these beliefs. Number 5 would be fears, and the fears would be, I cannot let go of my insecurities and control what will happen. How will I know that, if I let go of them, I'll stop controlling things? How do I know what will happen? And remember, the beliefs come from historical places in the past. All right, so now what can we consider our ministry protocol in dealing with these things? Number 1, find where the insecurity began. It could even be in the womb. Some people believe they're not wanted and therefore they're not feeling protected or safe even before they were born. It can come from a life event or a theme in the home from early life experiences, osmosis, growing up, or even the family line. So we're looking for the source and the origin, the beginning place for the insecurity. Okay, number 2, we may need deliverance. Sometimes there is a control spirit that's on that, but we do that concurrently or at the same time with healing the associated beliefs. Remember, if we don't deal with the beliefs, then the deliverance may not be effective. But if there is a spirit where there's an inordinate amount of control, it's empowered, it's magnified, it's amplified, then we may need to cast out a demon, but we need to deal with the beliefs that have opened the door or given place to it to begin with. Number 3, sometimes teaching. As you go with how to be releasing, we teach people how to be releasing and hold things loosely. Sometimes people are not aware of what they're doing or that it's not in God's order. But once you expose the discrepancy or the thing that's out of line with God's ways, and you give perspective by renewing their mind and the knowledge in their mind, it leaves them free to decide on their path and change their thinking and be repentant, which would be the basis of helping with number 2, which is the deliverance as well. Let me just note, you don't need to remember all of this to minister. It's to help you to understand that controlling behavior often flags insecurity beliefs in the person. It's not necessarily that you study every detail of this, just the basic principles. All right, let's have a look at what our sample ministry, and again, will go a little bit quicker than it sometimes does. There's often quite a bit of talking happens with people as they're telling their story, and so you're listening and making notes. But let's imagine we just had a very easy ministry where the person's quite in touch with their emotions, and look at how we would minister to ungodly control that's presenting and coming from insecurity. So this time we'll say it's a lady, and we'll call her Frida instead of Fred. All right, so okay, imagine Frida's come in and I've asked her, what's the problem? And Frida says, well, my husband says that I'm very controlling. So I say, well, give me an example of why he would call you that. Frida thinks about it. She says, sometimes he gets home later than he should from work, and he complains that I'm always at him to be on time. He says he feels controlled and he can't even stop off at the supermarket on the way home. So I would say, okay, well, what do you feel will happen if he isn't home on time? Frida ponders for a moment and thinks about it, and she says, I guess that I feel that there will be nobody there for what I need, and it's not fair. Okay, so I would say to her, well, I want you to concentrate on those thoughts that it's not fair that nobody is there for what you need, and see if you can remember another time as early as possible in your life where you felt just like that. Frida goes, well, as soon as you asked me that, the memory of my first day of school came into my mind. I felt just like that. All of the other kids were picked up, but my mum didn't arrive for ages. Okay, so then I would say to Frida, well, Frida, as you look at that situation, what's the strongest way to describe what you believed as a result of that event? Frida thinks about it for a moment and says, I guess I believe that I'm not important, and so nobody is bothering to be there for me, and so I feel unprotected. Okay, well, as you concentrate on that feeling that you're unprotected because nobody's bothering to be there for you, let's see what the Lord has for you. So she now would probably close her eyes and concentrate on that feeling. And so we might pray a simple prayer like, Lord, what would you like Frida to know? She believes that she's not important enough to be there for her and she feels unprotected. And so we have a pause for a moment, and then Frida says something like, it seems like my own thoughts, but it seems as if he's saying that I'm important to him and that he's set his affection on me. And then the scripture came into my mind that he will never leave me nor forsake me, which means he'll always be there for me. Okay, so Frida, do you still believe that you're not important enough to be there for? And she says, no. She says, no, now I understand. I'm very important. I also just remembered that my mum had a flat tire and that was why she was so late. But I knew that and it didn't seem to fix the problem. So then I would explain to her, that's probably because you took in the belief when you were very upset and emotionally vulnerable. It's what you perceive to be true at the moment of weakness that really counts and becomes what you believe, and it's a conclusion that's deeply stored in your heart, and as a result, it's now the inner thought that remained. So then I'd say, Frida, how do you feel about your husband getting home late now? She thinks about it, she says, well, it's strange, but it's fine. I can't believe that it mattered so much to me. It seems a bit ridiculous. He should be able to do some errands if he wants to. So you see the picture changes. But people will often have a number of different beliefs coming from different events that produce fear and insecurity. And so very often we need to work through all of those, and we just keep working through them and often teach them about the ways of God as well to renew their minds along with the healing of the heart beliefs or the resolving of the heart beliefs. All right, next we're going to move into Unit 9, where we'll see the beginning of low self-image and inferiority, the fruit it produces, and how to deal with it. I hope you're able to continue with us as we journey towards the end of the school. We'll see you soon.